Namaste and good morning. Let's start our Sunday class where we go through the Gita verses. So before that, let's do some prayers. Om Parthaye Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayan Swayam Vyasen Gratitam Puran Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Ritvarshini Bhagavati Mashtadashadhyayane Am Tvam Anusandhame Bhagavad Gita Bhavdveshine नमो अस्तु ते व्यास विशाल बुद्धे फुल अरविंद आयत पत्र नेत्र येन तव्या भारत तैल पूर्णः प्रज्वलितो ज्ञान में प्रदीपः प्रपन्न पारी जाताये तोत्र वेत्र एक पाने ज्ञान मुद्राये कृष्णाय गीता अमृत दुहे नमः सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपाल नंदना पार्थो वत्सा सुधीर भोगता दुग्धम गीता अमृतम महत वसुदेव सुतम देवम कंस चानूरमर्दनम देवकी परमानंदम कृष्णम वंदे जगद्गुरुम भीष्म द्रोण तटा जयद्रथ चला गांधार नीलोत्पला शल्य ग्राहवती कृपेन वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थाम विकर्ण घोर मकरा दुर्योधन अवर्तनी सो तीर ना खलु पांडवई रन नदी के वर्तका केशवा पाराशरे वत्सरोजमलम गीता अर्थ गंधोटकम नानाख्यानक केसरम हरि कथा संबोधन नबोदितम लोके सज्जन षटपद रह रह पेपिये मानम मुदा भूयाद भारत पंकजम कलिमल पद्मंसी न श्रेयसे मूकम करोति वाचालम पंगुम लंघ्यते गिरन यत्कृपातमहं वंदे परमानंद माधवम यं ब्रह्म वरुण इंद्र रुद्र मरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यस्तवे वेदै सांग पद क्रमोपनिषदै गायन्ति यम सामगा ध्यानवस्थे तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यम योगिनो यस्यन्तं न विदुसुर असुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः. Let's open our Bhagavad Gita books. We are on chapter 18 and we ended our class, last week's class, verse number 35. And Lord Krishna is telling us the constituents of action. Then he described the factors that motivate and control the action. Now he's moving on to the goal of action. So let's look at verse number 36. Sukham tu idanim trividham shrinu me bharat rishabh abhyasat ramate yatra dukhantam cha nigachati. Sukham, pleasure. Tu mean indeed. Idanim, now. Trividham, threefold. Shrinu, here. Me means me. Bharat Rishabh, O Lord of the Bharats. That is for Arjuna. He belonged to a Bharat dynasty. Abhyasat, from practice. Ramate, rejoices. Yatra, in which. Dukhantam, the end of pain. Ant of the dukkha. Cha means and, nigachati, attains to. So Lord Krishna is saying, and now hear from me, O best among the Bharats, of the threefold pleasure, in which one rejoices by practice, and surely comes to the end of pain. So we saw that three factors that constitute the impulse of all the actions: the knowledge, the actor, and the action. Afterwards, the very motive forces in all activities which propel the activity, which control and direct our activity. He talked about buddhi and dhriti. And he said all of these can be three kinds. All of these. The actor also, the action also, the buddhi also, dhriti also, everything. Because whenever we do any action, we are guided by some knowledge. Then we are ruled by the understanding of that knowledge, the buddhi. And then to maintain that action, we need fortitude also, dhriti. So this is how Lord Krishna dissected the work for us, the action for us, so that we can understand the anatomy as well as the physiology of action. Okay? Now we got to think about it. Why do we act? Why do we do certain actions? That is called the psychology of action. There got to be some reason why we act. What is the ultimate motive behind our action? And when we think about it, it is for search for happiness. Everyone desires to be happy through their action. They seek fulfillment, peace, satisfaction. Since everyone's actions differ in their constituent factors, the kind of happiness they derive out of their action is also different. That's what he's going to talk about. So craving for happiness is very natural. So we all are working to gain happiness. That is our goal. But since the constituents are different, the happiness is different too. When we understand this complete scheme of things within, to a large extent, we can diagnose ourselves. We can understand ourselves. Why we go through miseries. Even though we want happiness, but we end up feeling miserable. Why? We got to learn how to readjust, how to reevaluate our life so that we can end our sorrows. At least reduce the sorrows. So let's look at it. What is a sattvic happiness according to Lord Krishna in verse number 37? Yat tat agre visham ev pariname amrita upamam tat sukham sattvikam proktam atam buddhi prasadjam. Yat means which, that means that. Agre, at first. That means in the beginning. Visham, vish is poison. Iv means like, pariname, in the end. Amrita upamam, like nectar. That means that, sukham, pleasure, sattvikam, sattvic, pure, proktam is declared to be atam buddhi prasadjam, born of the purity of one's own mind due to self-realization. Atam buddhi prasadjam. That which is like poison at first, but nectar like in the end. That pleasure is declared to be sattvic. Born of the purity of one's own mind due to self-realization. So what he's saying that in the beginning, when we are struggling to know ourselves, we got to do the sadhana. It is strenuous. He says it's almost like a poison, painful. When it works itself out, fulfills itself, a nectarine success. And that is an enduring happiness. That is a sattvic happiness. So happiness that arises from constant effort is the happiness that can yield as a greater beauty, which has a larger sense of fulfillment. It's not a flimsy happiness. It's enduring happiness. Because happiness which we gain through the sensuous indulgence, that is flimsy. As soon as that object is done, our happiness is over, or we get bored with that also. But the joy arising out of the inner self-control and the consequent sense of self-perfection, this is not a cheap gratification. It's not a flimsy. But in the beginning, the practice is definitely arduous. But a person who has discovered in oneself the necessary courage and heroism to walk this path of self-purification and inward balance will definitely come to enjoy the subtlest. That's what Atam Buddhi Prasad is. So this kind of happiness, the sattvic happiness, arise out of self-control and self-discipline. That is classified as sattvic sukha. So remember the purity of our mind, Atam Buddhi Prasadajam. Got to learn how to live carefully a life of sattvic, having a disciplined self-control, and we can develop the prasad of our own inner nature. That's where the peace and tranquility, the joy and expansion that the mind and intellect can experience. So to summarize all this, Lord Krishna is talking about a sense of fulfillment and even a gladness of the heart comes as a result of the balanced and self-disciplined life of high ideals, divine values, enduring happiness will come from there. Okay, so discipline is needed. That's why when we go through the discipline in the beginning, it is painful. It is painful because we want to just stay in the bed at night, in the morning, don't want to get out. But a person who has decided to walk on this path will go through that discipline. Doing every action on time. Learning to be more selfless than selfish. All that will give us a sattvic happiness, which is enduring. And what is a rajasic happiness? Verse number 38. Vishe indriye sanyogat yat tat agre amrit upamam pariname visham iv tat sukham rajasam samritam. Vishe indriye sanyogat. Sanyog is the contact. Vishe is the objects. And indriya is the sense organs. So from the contact of the sense organs with the objects. Yat means which, tat means that, agre at first, amrit upmam like nectar. Pariname in the end, visham poison. Iv means like, tat means that. Sukham happiness or pleasure, rajasam rajasik, samritam is declared. That pleasure which arises from the contact of the sense organs with which the objects at first like nectar, but in the end like poison, that is declared to be rajasic. So rajasic happiness is experienced as a thrill that arises from the contact between the senses and their objects. But the joy, Lord Krishna is saying, is short-lived because the contact itself is short-lived. Because what happens is it leaves us with greed. We want more, anxiety, guilt, or even thickening of the material illusion. We think that it can stay with us, we can keep on enjoying it, but no, it is short-lived. So that happiness which arises in our heart with the help of the world of objects, indeed it's a thrill. That's why Lord Krishna is saying it's a nectarine in the beginning, but unfortunately it vanishes as quickly as it comes. We feel exhausted also after that kind of a thrill. So Rajasic happiness arises only when the sense organs are actually in contact with the sense objects. And unfortunately, we all know the contact cannot be permanently established. Objects are variable. And the subjective mind and intellect, the instruments that come in contact with the objects, are also variable and changing. Today we like it. Tomorrow we may not. The same thing gives us a thrill, and then we get bored with it too. So the sense organs cannot afford to embrace the sense objects at all times with the same kind of a appetite. And even if they do, the very object which sense organs wanted, that object will wither away. It will stink. So no person can fully enjoy even the passing glitter of joy that the sense organs give him forever. And also there's always a anxiety that it may be gone. It may leave me. That fear also is in the mind. So the temporary joys of the sense objects are not at all satisfactory. They bury the enjoyer in sorrow. That's what he's saying. In the beginning, it seems great, but end is not that good. So what is a tamasic happiness then? Yat agre cha anubandhe cha sukham mohanam atmana nidra alasya parmad uttam tat tamsam udahritam. Yat means which, agre at first, cha means and, anubandhe in its consequence. Cha means and, sukham happiness, mohanam delusive, atmana of the self. Nidra alasya parmad uttam. Uttam means arising from. Nidra is the sleep, alasya is the laziness, and parmad is the carelessness or negligence. Tat means that, tamsam tamsik, udaharitam is declared. The pleasure which at first and in the sequel deludes the self, arising from sleep, laziness, and carelessness, is declared to be tamasic. So tamasic happiness is of the lowest kind. In fact, it's a foolishness from beginning to the end. It throws the soul into a darkness of ignorance. We forget who we are. Since there's a tiny experience of pleasure, people get addicted to it. That is why, for example, cigarette smokers find it difficult to break their habit. Even while knowing fully well that it's harming them, the pleasure derived from smoking, they cannot let go. Okay? So that's why he said, rising from sleep, nidra, alasya, and pramad. Because tamasic happiness deludes the higher in us. We forget who we are. It's like a very thick crust of wrong values and false ideals. We just become insensitive towards our real nature because we are running after this tamasic happiness. So these three terms, nidra, alasya, and pramad, these are the three terms we got to understand. What do they mean? The nidra, the sleep, we all sleep every day, but he's not talking about that sleep. Philosophically, the term sleep means non-apprehension of reality. That's a sleep. It's like an incapacity of the dull-witted to perceive anything permanent, ever existing goal of life. We are sleeping towards it. Because we are sleeping towards the higher goal. That's why it's called. And then we just want to have a sense gratification, whatever is in front of us. That's what this nidra means. And then what is alasya, indolence? It is the incapacity of the intellect to think out correctly the problems that you are facing. So alasya is an inertia of the intellect. Because this alasya makes us insensitive towards the inspiring song of life. The intellect is a tamasic intellect, just keeps on fluctuating in the impulses or with the instincts, cannot see the goal. And then pramad, the carelessness. This lower indolent mind seeks a compromise and tries to act carelessly. Carelessly. Does not listen to that higher voice, the deeper voice. A person becomes more and more removed from his divine perfections, sinks lower and lower into the animal nature. So when such a person who is careless of the higher calls and lazy at his intellectual level and completely asleep to the existence and the play of reality, will seek happiness where he has deluded himself, doesn't even know who he is, both in the beginning and even towards the end. Yat agrech anubandhech. So this kind of a happiness is called tamasic. Now in the next verse, he's telling us, he's kind of a concluding this subject over here for us. Verse number 40. Na tat astihi prithivyam vav divi deveshu vapuna Sattvam prakriti jay muktam yat ebhi syat tribhi gune. Na means not, tat means that, asti is, prithivyam on the earth. Va means or, divi in the heavens, deveshu among the devtas. Va means or, punah again. Sattvam being, prakriti jay born of prakriti, muktam freed, yat means which, ebhi from these, sayat may be, tribhi from three, gune by qualities. There is no being on earth. And he's talking about us. No being on earth or again in the heavens among the devtas. So those are the heavenly beings. Who is totally liberated from the three qualities. Born of Prakriti. So these guns have been described because there's no living organism in the world who is totally free from the influence of these three gunas. That's the message is giving us. No living creature can act or work beyond the frontiers provided by these three guns. Because Prakriti itself is constituted of these three guns. And the play of these three gunas is the very expression of Prakriti. But we know at the same time, no two creatures react in the world outside in the same fashion. Because the proportion of these guns keep on changing. In us also, and in others also. But When we put together these three guns, it's the manifestation of Maya. That's why we differ from each other. That's why we differ from time to time also. It's the Maya that gives us our individuality. Because at the soul level, we are all same. There's no difference at all. But these guns make us look different, feel differently, act differently. So an individual cannot at any time exist without all these three guns, whatever be their relative proportion. So let us introspect and evaluate ourselves every day. At least before sleeping at night, what was my day like today? Was it predominantly sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic? Or if you want to do several times a day, that's fine too. Let us avoid the lower guns and steadily work ourselves up towards the achievement of the sattvic state. Sattvic action, sattvic buddhi, sattvic happiness. Let's try to understand that. And steadily work ourselves up towards the achievement of the sattvic state. Only after reaching the state of the sattvic, we can usher into the state of godliness, perfection, absolute. From tamasic, we cannot become, we go there. We have to just reduce the tamasikta almost to nothing. Reduce the rajasikta also, increase the sattvikta. That is the purpose of learning all this. So certain well-defined characteristics determine the types of these four classes of human beings. This is what he's going to go into in the next few verses. They are not determined by the birth, the four classes. Normally we call Brahman a Brahman because a major proportion of sattvikta, that's a Brahman. Because there's a little rajas and minimum tamas. All three are there, but proportion is a little different. Then Kshatriya, mostly rajas, some sattva, a dash of tamas. And Vaishya, more rajas, less sattva, and some tamas. And we'll see that he will define the Shudra, mostly tamas, little rajas, with only a suspicion of sattva. So proportion changes. So these fourfold classification is universal for all times. It was true in the past. It holds good even today. In the modern language, we may call it the creative thinkers, the politicians, the commercial employers, or the laborers. Terminology can change, but these guns, that fundamental idea behind all this does not change. And we saw that in a beautiful verse in 4th chapter, verse number 13. Chaturvarnyam maya srishtam gunkaram vibhagisha tasya kartaram api mama vidye akartaram avyam. So Lord Krishna said the four categories of occupations were created by me, according to people's qualities and activities. Karma and gun. And gun is what we talked about, sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, and karma is the action. So in the next few verses, we'll see that he's trying to make us understand this inner equipment of ours is changeable. Soul doesn't change, but our personality can change. These guns can change. If we want to become more and more sattvic, we can. It's up to us. So, swabhav and swadharma. These are the two terms I want you to remember. Swabhav means our nature, swabhav. And swadharma is a station in life. Okay, so in the next few verses, this is what he's telling us. Let's look at verse number 41. Brahman kshatriye visham shudra nam cha param tap karmane pravibhaktane swabhav prabhve gunay. Brahman kshatriye vaishya shudra nam of shudras. Cha means also param tap for Arjun. Karmani duties pravibhaktane are distributed. Swabhav prabhave, born of their own nature. Gunai, by qualities. So he says of scholars, of leaders, and of traders, as also of workers. O Paramtapa, the duties are distributed according to the qualities born of their own nature and gunas. So after dealing with the various guns in the previous verses, Lord Krishna is telling us that this whole society, the humanity, can be intelligently classified in 4 distinct heads: Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. So different types of duties are assigned to each of these classes of individuals depending upon their swabhav, nature, and which is ordered by the proportion of the guns in the makeup of each type of inner equipment. The duties prescribed for a particular type depend upon the manifestation of the inner ruling guns. Inner ruling. So the good and the bad are not diagnosed by examining the textures of person's skin or color of the hair, or judged by the expressions in life, by the quality of his contact in the world outside. These alone can reflect our inner personality, the quality and the texture of the contents of our mind and intellect. That means our subtle personality. I'm sure you have heard the word varna. Varnas were not considered higher or lower among themselves. Since the center of society was God, everyone worked according to their intrinsic qualities to sustain themselves in the society and made their life a success by progressing towards the God realization, because that was the goal for everybody. So Varna ashram system, there was a unity in diversity. And we can see that this diversity is inherent in nature, which can never be removed. In our own body, we have various limbs, and each limb performs its own function. We cannot expect our legs to do the same as our eyes are doing. So in the body, we see it. So the variety among the human beings cannot be ignored. So when the system grew rigid and it became a birth-based, you remember Lord Krishna said it is based upon the gun and the karma, not by birth. So the system became dysfunctional, and this was a social defect, but not the original intent of the nature. So we got to understand it properly, because sometimes we just criticize the system without even knowing what does it really mean. So when we study scriptures, more clarity is given in the scriptures. So the duties prescribed for a Brahman, naturally, according to the qualities, the swabhav of a Brahman. And they got to be different from those expected of a Kshatriya. And the work of a Vaishya and a Shudra, definitely different from the Brahman and the Kshatriya. And the scriptures, they enjoin duties by telling us that what is predominant in a particular person. By observing a person, one can conclude which class he belongs to, whether to Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. So the type of a person's action, the quality of his ego, because that also he talked about the ego, the color of our knowledge, the texture of our understanding, the temper of our fortitude, and the brilliance of our happiness will determine our varna. Not our last name, not the family we were born in. So in this context, we can say that a person is sattvic when the sattvic qualities are predominant in that person. That's a sattvic person. And even in the most sattvic of the persons, at times, we can see some rajasic and tamasic, but rarely. Because Lord Krishna himself, he said, no one is exclusively of one gun alone. It is a play of all three gunas. So today, these four classifications have lost much of their meaning. They signify merely a heredity or a birthright in the society. And that's why it's looked down upon. A true Brahman is a highly cultured sattvic person, can easily control his senses, sense organs. And a Brahman is a perfect master of his mind, can raise himself through contemplation to the highest peaks of meditation upon the infinite. We'll see that. He will define it more for us in the verses which we're going to touch upon next week. A scholarly person who likes to study, who likes to teach, who has the senses perfectly in control. More and more sattvika in that person. So answering the four types of nature, there are four kinds of social beings, each having a definite function in society also. So Brahmins are needed, the Vaishyas are needed, the Shudras are needed, Kshatriyas are needed too. And that's what he will be describing. So in verse number 42, we'll see that how beautifully he is telling us the Brahman's duties and Brahman's temperament also. Shama, Dama, Tapa, Shocham, Kshanti, Arjum, Evcha, Jnanam, Vigyanam, Astikyam, Brahm, Karam, Swabhavacham. So this is the nature. Brahman is born with these qualities. And born doesn't mean that by birth is born, he can cultivate these qualities too. If you want to become a Brahman, you got to cultivate more and more Satvikta in us. So next week we'll start with the verse number 42, and let's do the Shanti part. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaye Purnameva Visheshyate. Om Shanti 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 Om. Thank you very much.